Hey guys, and welcome back. Today in this video we're going to be discussing what are some of potentially the better value bets for week 7 in college football. And first, before I get into the video, I want to say that I'm really appreciative of all the positive response we've been getting on these videos, just in terms of video likes and subscribers and views overall. It's very much appreciated, and if you want to get more pick analysis and content beyond just what you see in this video, you can head over to stumpthespread.com and you can register a free or premium account there to get more picks, not just across college football, but also the NFL, NBA, college basketball, NHL, and MLB. Alright, so for more videos like this in the future, you can also hit that subscribe button. We're planning on continuing to release these college football videos weekly, and then once college basketball rolls around, we're going to be releasing those videos on more of a daily basis. So heading into the first matchup this week, we have App State versus Louisiana Lafayette. Appalachian State, they haven't played quite as well as they wanted to coming into the year, but you can forgive them for their losses against Tennessee and Miami. Those were obviously pretty tough matchups for them. Louisiana Lafayette, in their toughest matchup so far this year, it was a home game against Boise State, and they lost that one by 35, so it just goes to show that the Cajuns are susceptible to getting blown out at home when going against better competition. And also with Jalen Nixon being out, that hurts their chances here. If Marcus Cox is able to go, that gives Appalachian State a boost coming to this one, but even if Marcus Cox is unable to go, we still feel more confident siding with the Mountaineers, who are one of the favorites to win the Sun Belt at this point. Not the best value bet on the board, but if we had to take it, we'd side with the Mountaineers here. Navy coming off their huge win against Houston, obviously a great win for their program. It could be a little tough for the team to refocus, though, coming into this mid-game week on the road against East Carolina. The Pirates have underperformed from their expectations, and they've even been blown out on multiple occasions, which isn't the greatest sign, especially for the team's confidence overall. Right now, we're unsure what the status is with Philip Nelson, which kind of puts a wrench in this, and is why the spread hasn't been released at multiple books. With Philip Nelson out, we'd probably give the slight edge to Navy, but even then, coming off a huge win, going on the road against a team that might be beaten down, but still looking to bounce back. Their season isn't over yet, and East Carolina still has the kind of team where they could potentially get to bowl eligibility when they're playing at their best. We saw that in their upset win over NC State, so we're going to need, obviously, more information on this game before we can make a really strong opinion on it. But just on the onset, I'd probably take East Carolina with the points. But we still obviously don't know how Philip Nelson is doing, so I'd probably hold off on this one for now. Louisville remains high in the rankings with a pretty good shot at still making the playoff if they're able to run the table. Duke, they've been a bit up and down this year, and obviously Thomas Sirk being out, they're not quite the same threat on the offensive side of the ball. If Louisville brings their A game, they can obviously wipe the floor here with Duke. The Duke defense is decent when going against moderate competition, but we just see that this unit having a really hard time keeping up with Louisville's explosive offense. Even though it's a ton of points to give, Louisville will be looking to make a statement on the national stage here on their home field, so we're going to side with the home team giving the points. Moving down to Memphis and Tulane. Memphis's offense really hasn't taken much of a step back this year compared to the unit last year that was led by one of the best quarterbacks in the conference. The change at quarterback hasn't been a huge detriment to the offense. The Tigers still have a lot of talent at the skill positions, which has helped them out. This past week, Memphis had a really tough battle on their hands in their home game against Temple, but they were able to pull through in that one. Tulane, they've been kind of a tough team to get a read on so far this year. They've been, a little up and down with their results against varying levels of competition. Memphis, if they get their offense going, they should be able to get by this spread on the road. We don't love this pick per se, but we would cautiously side with the Tigers giving the points in this one against the Green Wave. Moving down to Mississippi State versus BYU, the Cougars have gone against arguably the toughest schedule in the nation so far this year, and one would think that they would be getting worn down by going against such brutal competition on a weekly basis, but the Cougars actually looked better last week than they have in any other game so far this year, and winning on the road against Michigan State. Not only did they win, but it was in convincing fashion against a Michigan State team that's really in a desperate situation to prove themselves and get their season back on track. So that was a great result for BYU. Mississippi State is looking like the weakest team from the SEC West. Obviously, that division's consistently the best in college football, but this Bulldogs team just isn't looking as strong as they have in recent years. And obviously, with Dak Prescott gone, that's making it hard for the transition of Mississippi State into this year. So BYU's looking really strong right now, coming off their win on the road against Michigan State. And if they play with that same kind of passion and desire that they showed in that game, they should be able to pull away with their strong home field advantage in this one against a Bulldogs team that really hasn't been all that impressive. So we like BYU to win and cover, giving over a touchdown, like in this one over here. It's not quite as good, but a touchdown or less, definitely siding with the Cougars. All right, San Diego State against Fresno State. San Diego State's been a really tough team to get a read on this year. Coming into the year, they were one of the favorites to win the Mountain West Conference, and their offense has definitely lived up to that hype and probably even surpassed expectations up to this point. But their defense has been a huge disappointment until last week, where San Diego State ended up winning with their defense against UNLV, allowing the Rebels just to score 7 points. So this was a good bounce-back result for the San Diego State defense, and it'll be interesting to see if that defensive result will carry over into future conference games for the Aztecs. San Diego State has been really strong on offense because they have one of the best running backs in the country, and we expect their offense to put up significant points here again against the Bulldogs. And if their defense is able to show us what they showed last week, then even giving this many points on the road, we still like the Aztecs. Fresno State, they've been a little up and down, but they've definitely been susceptible to getting blown out, and going against the best team in the conference, we just don't have all that much confidence in the home team coming into this one. Alright guys, so that finishes off all the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday games. So now we're going to start heading into Saturday's games, and the first one that we're going to be covering is Eastern Michigan versus Ohio. The Eagles, this is one of the best seasons so far that the program's ever had, which really isn't saying much because Eastern Michigan's been a consistent poor performer in the MAC ever since they joined the FBS. But this team has looked like they can compete at a pretty respectable level this year in the MAC, and even like their win against Wyoming, that was a pretty impressive result considering how many turnovers they had. The one issue I have with Eastern Michigan is their quarterback play isn't all that strong, and they've been going back and forth between their two guys, so that's never a good position to be in at this point in the year. But anyways, going in on the road against Ohio, this is going to be a pretty tough matchup. We can see the spread's already gone from -10 to -7. Ohio is one of the stronger teams in the MAC East, but the MAC East isn't nearly as good as the MAC West, which is where Eastern Michigan resides. Ohio hasn't played up to their high expectations that they had coming into the year, but this is still a team that can certainly win the MAC East and go to the MAC title game. Obviously, we wouldn't expect them to win in the MAC title game, whether it be against Toledo or Western Michigan. But Ohio, they should be able to get the job done here on their home field, especially considering Eastern Michigan's not all that secure right now with their quarterback play. So if Ohio's able to, play up to even a portion of what they've been expected to do so far this year, they should be able to cover this one touchdown spread, already going from -10 to -7. So we side with the Bobcats in this one as a decent value bet. All right, going down to Temple and UCF. We really like the progress we've seen with Central Florida. Even in that Michigan game where they were absolutely blown out, interestingly enough, Central Florida pretty much doubled the Wolverines with their ground game, which was an impressive result even in the blowout. And Central Florida has shown that they can score in all three phases of the game with special teams, defense, and offense. You can see that Vegas is starting to get on to UCF right now, going from -1 in this one at home to already -3, and this could even continue to go up from here. Temple, they haven't been as good this year as they were last year, mainly because they lost a lot of veterans on the defensive side of the ball, but their quarterback play from the veteran Philip Walker is looking pretty strong right now. But going back-to-back on the road and in conference play in 2 straight weeks obviously can be difficult and wear down on a team. Given the momentum that Central Florida has right now, we definitely think they have decent value here, giving up the field goal at home. Alright, so our next game is going to be Iowa State against Texas. Iowa State opened up the year really slow, but they've looked much better as of late, even in losing recent weeks against Baylor and Iowa State, or not Iowa State, Oklahoma State. The Cyclones have been right in the game at the end, which is an impressive result for a team that lost to an FCS opponent and then got blown out by their rival to open up the year in back-to-back defeats. Iowa State's been looking much better, while Texas, on the other hand, they opened with 2 nice wins, but even those wins now don't look as good with how UTEP and Notre Dame have kind of fallen off. And also, there's just a ton of pressure on this team right now, not just from the fan base, but from the coaching staff as well, because the coaching staff remains on the hot seat with how the Horns have been falling apart as of late. So right now, this feels like a pretty good bet, getting the Cyclones. If you can get the full 2 touchdowns, that would be ideal, but right now this one's sitting at 13.5. Alright, the next game that I've written down here to cover is Northwestern against Michigan State. So it seems like every week I expect Michigan State to bounce back because they have, quite a few veteran players. They got a good coaching staff, and Michigan State's just been a really strong, consistent team in the Big Ten over the last half decade or so. And seeing this team struggle even on their home field has been pretty surprising, to say the least. You can see that this spread's already gone from -7 to -4.5. People are obviously selling even at this low point for the Spartans. Northwestern, they've been a bit inconsistent with their results, but they did pick up a really nice road win against Iowa recently, so they have that feather in their cap. This should probably be a lower scoring game given the strength of these teams are their defense, but I just have a hard time seeing Michigan State continue to fall into the basement of the Big Ten. They just have too much talent for that, and I'm going to buy this team low. We're getting already 2.5 more points than what this opened at, and it could go down even further from this. I'm going to buy low on the Spartans here and give the 4.5 points as they bounce back, and really they almost have to win this game if they're going to try to reach some kind of bowl game by the end of the year. So we look for the Spartans to bounce back here and cover this spread. Alright, moving down to Kansas State and Oklahoma. Oklahoma obviously not living up to their really high expectations this year, but this offense has been playing at a really high level, and we saw that last week in their win against Texas. They put almost 600 yards of offense, and Oklahoma on their home field, they definitely should be able to generate really good numbers even against a adequate Kansas State defense. You can see the spread's gone down from -14 to -10, and I think people are overvaluing Kansas State a little bit. They don't have the horses on the offensive side of the ball to keep pace with Oklahoma if the Sooners show the kind of explosive offensive output that they showed us last week against Texas. Especially on their home field, we think that the Sooners giving just the 10 points feels like a pretty solid bet at this point in the week. Alright, Southern Miss and LSU. You can see that this spread has already gone from -18 to -25.5, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that Southern Miss surprisingly had a really bad week in a upset defeat against UTSA, and obviously there's no excuse for that result, even for a pretty solid veteran team like Southern Miss, but I have to think that the Golden Eagles were looking ahead to this road matchup against LSU and kind of overlooking UTSA a bit. LSU, they didn't have to play last week because their game with Florida got postponed. Having Leonard Fournette being doubtful in this one makes things a little bit tougher for LSU. Coming off a week, where their game was delayed, that could have an effect where either the team is a bit fresher or they could be a bit rusty coming into this matchup. Southern Miss, they're one of the better group of 5 teams in the country, even though they've been a bit up and down with their results. But if the veteran quarterback Nick Mullins is able to go, that gives the Golden Eagles a boost here. Going from -18 to -25.5, we really feel like the Golden Eagles are getting oversold here. And also people are looking too much into LSU's blowout win against Missouri when we have to consider that this team has generally struggled so far this year. But perhaps they've turned the corner since firing their head coach, but I don't know if firing the head coach is enough of a boost to get this team to play at that high level consistently on a weekly basis throughout the rest of the regular season. So we're going to side with the points here and buy low on the Golden Eagles. West Virginia and Texas Tech. This should be a really, really high-scoring game. Texas Tech has looked unbelievably impressive for pretty much the entire regular season so far with their pass game. They should be able to pretty much pick apart this West Virginia defense and score touchdowns on practically, if not every other possession, every possession. I'd be surprised if the Red Raiders weren't able to put up a ton of consistent yardage through the air in this matchup at home. West Virginia, they've had the luxury of playing at home quite a bit so far this year, and we're kind of interested to see how this Mountaineer squad is going to adapt in what can be a fairly difficult atmosphere at Texas Tech. We really like what we've been seeing from Mahomes from the Red Raiders. He's shown pretty strong progress. This is his second year as a starter, and he really surprised a lot of people with how tremendous he was in his first year, but he's shown even better decision making this year. Obviously, Texas Tech is really weak on the defensive side of the ball, but we like them to get just enough stops behind their home field advantage to win this game straight up. It's a pick 'em, and then you see that's -1 here for Texas Tech and -1 for West Virginia. It should hang right around this throughout the rest of the week. I'd be surprised if it shifted any one way. All right, the next game that I have written down here is Tulsa and Houston. So obviously Houston's really disappointed coming off of their pretty much football playoff ending defeat last week where they were upset by Navy. It's going to be interesting to see how the mindset of this squad is able, to get back this week. It's going to be a tough job for the coaching staff to get the Cougars' heads back in the right place coming off of basically a season-ending loss. Even though this squad still could go to a really nice bowl game, the playoff is pretty much completely out of contention for Houston, which is too bad because, this was a really great shot for a group of 5 school to make it to the college playoff, but the bottom line is when you're in a group of 5 conference, you just don't have the same kind of margin for error that you can have if you're like in the SEC or something. So it's really too bad for the Cougars, but obviously they lost the game and they didn't deserve to win, so they have to take their defeat for what it is. Now Tulsa, obviously their defense is pretty weak and they should get shredded by Houston, but offensively Tulsa is one of the better teams in the conference. We probably would feel that Tulsa needs to score about 28 points in this one to have a really good shot at covering the spread, and we think that the Golden Hurricane should be able to do that. So even with this spread shrinking a bit, getting the 3 full touchdowns, we feel like Tulsa is a pretty decent value bet here. All right, Central Michigan against Northern Illinois. CMU obviously started the year really hot, and they've been cooling off a bit as of late. And then Northern Illinois, they were one of the favorites to win the MAC West coming into the year, but they've obviously disappointed pretty greatly. And then the injury to quarterback Drew Hare has really tempered expectations for the Huskies. Now Central Michigan, defensively this year, they've been pretty hit or miss, but when their defense is playing at a respectable level, the offense has shown enough consistency to, get the chips consistent wins. But as of late, Central has really been failing hard on the defensive side of the ball, but they should be able to fix that somewhat coming up here in MAC play against going a slightly more manageable schedule. And Central Michigan has also shown they can show up on the road, as evident by their win at Oklahoma State in a game that they were huge underdogs in. We'll side with the chips to kind of bounce back here, and this has already gone from -4 to -2.5, so giving just under a field goal, we feel pretty solid with the chips here as a decent value bet. All right, so scrolling down here to Western Kentucky against Middle Tennessee State. Western Kentucky, not obviously the same threat they were last year with Brandon Doughty as their quarterback, but this is still a team that's a threat in Conference USA, just not likely a threat to win the conference championship. Western Kentucky's coming off a close defeat on the road against Louisiana Tech, and going into their second straight tough road game, that can have a wearing effect on a team, so we're a little bit concerned about the Hilltoppers coming into this one. Middle Tennessee State, they're another team that can push for the conference title. They have the same quarterback they had last year, Brent Stockstill, who's been putting up pretty solid numbers, and MTSU should be able to move the ball pretty consistently against a Western Kentucky defense that was really gashed quite a bit in giving up 55 points to Louisiana Tech. Behind their home field advantage, Middle Tennessee State just feels like the better value bet here, and basically a pick 'em. So we'll side with the Blue Raiders as the better value bet here. All right, so we have 3 more games left here on the list. Going to here it is, Stanford Notre Dame. This game opened up as a pick 'em. Notre Dame has actually, somewhat surprisingly, become about a field goal favorite, but it shouldn't be all that surprising for those that have been watching Stanford recently. The Cardinal, we thought that they were a little bit overrated coming into the year, but even we didn't foresee them, getting blown out in back-to-back weeks against Washington and Washington State, even though we did like their opponents to cover in both of those situations. Now Stanford, after coming off a rather embarrassing home blowout defeat against Washington State, now they have to travel on the road to face a Notre Dame team that should be really hungry for a win, coming off a defeat against NC State where you really can't blame Notre Dame too much for that one. They were playing pretty much in a swimming pool because it was raining so much, and rain really has a way of evening things out. We really thought Notre Dame had a good shot at picking up that win last week in NC State if the weather just would have been at a reasonable situation, but Notre Dame's offense, obviously discounting last week, has looked pretty strong, and going against a Stanford defense that's been getting gashed as of late, especially through the air, we think that the Irish have the edge here, and if you can get it at just about a field goal, that's pretty good. We don't see Stanford necessarily bouncing back here, and then also with the concerns with Christian McCaffrey, things could start spiraling down here pretty quickly for Stanford if they're not able to right the ship pretty soon. So it'll be interesting to see how this game shapes out, but we definitely like the Irish giving the points at home. Ohio State and Wisconsin, another really interesting matchup. We think that Wisconsin's slightly overrated. Their wins, or their marquee wins, come against LSU and Michigan State, and both those teams haven't looked quite as strong as expected coming into the year. Obviously, their competitive loss on the road against Michigan was a nice result, but we also can't forget the fact that this team almost lost at home to Georgia State, and also their quarterback play has come into question pretty much on a weekly basis, which is a concern going into a matchup against a really strong defense. Ohio State, they've gone against a fairly manageable schedule, but in their really tough matchup on the road against Oklahoma, they looked great in that game, and it just shows that even though Ohio State's young at a lot of positions, they can show up in a tough road environment and get the job done. So we're going to give the points here and take Ohio State to win and cover this moderate spread here against a Wisconsin team that's slightly overvalued right now. All right, and then moving into our last game that we're going to talk about for the Saturday contests, we have UNLV against Hawaii. We thought Hawaii had the ingredients to have a bounce-back year. That obviously didn't happen at the beginning of the year, but you really have to discount it considering the extremely difficult schedule that Hawaii had to face, not only with the opponents they faced, but the travel schedule. Now that things have calmed down a bit and Hawaii's been able to stay closer to home going into conference play, they've been much more successful, coming off back-to-back convincing wins against Nevada and last week against San Jose State on the road. UNLV, they've not shown great consistency on the offensive side of the ball, and their defense has shown that they can get gashed by decent competition. We really like the momentum Hawaii takes into this one, and the Rainbow Warriors really have a pretty strong home field advantage, considering how far teams have to travel, and then the change in time zone has an effect on teams. So just giving the touchdown, or even if you can get it just under a touchdown, Hawaii feels like a pretty solid value bet here, especially considering how they've been playing as of late. And they've been showing that they can get the job done, both with their ground game and the pass game, and we think that UNLV is, even if they pick their poison, they're going to have a tough time with. So if they like load up the box and try to stop the run, then they'll get beaten through the air pretty consistently, and then vice versa. If they try to stop the pass, they should get gashed by a pretty good stable of Hawaii running backs. So we like the home team to win and cover this spread. All right, guys. So that does it for all the games that I wanted to touch on here early in the week. So it's still just Monday, and a lot of injury information is going to be, coming out in the coming days. So you definitely got to keep your eye out for that. And some of these spreads could be shifting around, but at this point in the week, especially more specifically the Saturday games, those are kind of what I'm leaning towards right now. Again, if you want more of this kind of video content in the future, you can always subscribe and then get notifications for the videos that we release. And if you want free or premium pick content beyond just what you're getting in this video, then please check out stumpthespread.com, and you can make an account there. It's pretty easy and hassle-free. I really recommend that. So thanks, guys, for watching again, and I really appreciate all the support that I've been getting with these videos, and I'll see you next week for Week 8's matchups in college football. So thanks again, guys, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye.